All right, hello everybody, and welcome to another edition of Facebook and YouTube Live. And I am Brandon Oliver, the Director of Marketing and Communications, and I want to thank all of y'all for tuning in today. And want to introduce, we got some great special guests tonight, but I want to introduce the most special of them all. And I'm talking about Superintendent Roland Toscano. Mr. Toscano, how are you doing this evening?
Doing fantastic, Brandon.
All right. So, from what I understand, this is going to be about high school students that are in extracurriculars returning face to face, and I'll let you take it away.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks to everybody who's joining tonight. We want to talk a little bit about some of the challenges that we've been seeing, some of the struggles some students have been having, and some possible solutions that we think are going to serve many of our students very well. So first of all, I just briefly want to make sure that everybody is on the same page about the fact that COVID data in Bexar County in the metro area is trending in a positive direction. We also know that since we've implemented community labs, weekly COVID testing in our schools for staff and students, that data has been trending very positive. And in addition to that, we see school data all over the area, all over the state, all over the nation, really solidifying what we hoped for, and that is that schools are not a place where COVID is transmitted. In fact, in all of the cases that we've had in the district, not one of them has been attributed to an outbreak in our schools, meaning that students did not transmit it to students, students to staff, or staff to staff, staff to students while at school. All cases initiated in the community. And so with that, we're confident in saying that schools are safe, that you're less at risk when you're at school than you are when you're in the community in general. And so with that, we've also been working to vaccinate our staff. We've been working with the University Health System, and this week we got another 300 vaccines available for staff. And at the end of this week, or by the end of this week, we would have vaccinated as many as 600 employees, and many more have, secured their own vaccines. 2 weeks ago, Jinda Wu from San Antonio Metro Health ordered, in her opinion, it's a directive, but it doesn't carry with it authority, but ordered or recommended that contact sports were stopped, that it was a little too risky, that it's very difficult for student athletes to follow all the risk mitigation protocols in terms of close contact, mask wearing, and those sorts of things when competing. And so locally, our data suggests that that is not necessarily the case in East Central ISD, and that we wanted to find ways to continue to ensure our student athletes and coaches were safe and keep them on the field and on the court. And so as a result, we want to add another layer of risk mitigation, and we want to require all student athletes participating in in-season and out-of-season athletics to volunteer for COVID testing weekly. We have found that to be a really good way to add a more to give us more confidence that we're not putting any of our students and staff at risk, particularly as we have so many students who are at home during the day, but they show up for athletics or for practices and competitions. There will be an application process in the event that somebody feels that it's not appropriate for their child to test weekly. And so we'll share more about that process later. But we have found the testing to be very non-invasive, really quick, very reliable. We get results within 24 hours, and it just really gives staff and students a peace of mind. It also helps us get out in front of outbreaks. Also, helps us get out in front of cases where, like in most cases, are asymptomatic, had no symptoms whatsoever, did not realize they had been exposed, much less contracted the virus. And we can get them taken care of and out of the population for that short quarantine period and prevent any spread out in the community, much less any possible spread in our schools. The second thing that we've noticed is that, as we feared, students who are receiving instruction remotely are struggling more than students that are receiving instruction face-to-face. We also see that teachers are better serving students face-to-face than they are serving students remotely. They're getting better, and students are actually getting better with remote learning. But overall, we're seeing that students who in previous years seem to do much better academically than they're doing this year. So when we look at it case by case, we've got a higher percentage of students who are not doing as well remotely as they had done in previous years at the high school. At the high school, we've got about 35% of kids that are actually coming to school every day. And in our athletic programs, it fluctuates between 20 and 30% of our athletes are actually coming to school in person. So it's not very dissimilar. We see that when programs are in season, we have more students coming face to face. But then when we're out of season, they drift off, and a higher percentage ends up participating remote only. There's a saying in athletics that good students make good athletes, and good athletes are always good students. We know that the UIL for a long time has had a no pass, no play rule in effect. But one thing that isn't always at the front of our minds is that if a student doesn't earn enough credits in a previous year, they could start next year with 6 weeks of ineligibility. So for those reasons, we want to definitely get on top of academic issues that we're seeing right now and get kids on track. So our other measure that we think is going to serve many of our students well is to implement an in-person attendance required for all those participating in extra and school-related activities. There is an application process if a student athlete feels that they want to continue with remote learning, but they're going to have to meet some qualifying conditions, and we'll share that application with you momentarily. And they're also going to have to maintain 95% daily attendance in synchronous remote learning and an 80% or better average in every class. If a child is not thriving academically, a student athlete is not thriving academically, it could result in us scheduling some additional academic support. The bottom line is we've got to get kids on track during a time when it's been very difficult since last March for students to thrive academically. And if we have to move a kid into academic support, then we may temporarily have to remove them from athletics to get them back on track. We have built out some frequently asked questions. We've been talking about this for several weeks. In fact, we had considered doing this to start the year. Many districts in the area did implement such a policy at the beginning of the year. And in those programs, they're seeing as many as 75% of their athletes showing up for in-person learning every day. We didn't feel like it was appropriate to start the year with this kind of policy. But with what we know in COVID data and what we know from our student performance grades and their student and their data is that we've got to do something different, and now's the time. And we're at a point where we're transitioning to what next year is going to look like. And so with that, again, we'll share with you some FAQs. We've had a lot of questions over the last couple of weeks, and this week in particular, as coaches have had a chance to talk to their athletes and to hold parent meetings. And so we've created an FAQ that we have published, and we'll continue to add to that. I want to encourage you to continue to give your feedback because at the end of the day, the intent of all of this is to ensure that we're serving our students in the best way that we can, and we're giving our teachers the best opportunity to do the best that they can for your kids and keep our kids on the field, on the court, thriving academically, being those good students and good athletes that is our number one priority. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Brandon. I know that we've got Mr. McKay and our athletic director, Ms. Ariola, also backstage. And so, Brandon.
All right. And for those of you just tuning in, You can always go back and watch this video at any time. The same links that you took to get here, you can go back and watch it at any time if you missed something at the beginning. But just to recap, at the high school level, this isn't all grades, right? Just the high school level?
That's correct.
High school level, student involved in extracurricular activities is being asked to return face to face unless they fill out an opt-out form and meet that criteria. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
So it's
All right.
both returning in person, Brandon, and volunteering for weekly COVID testing.
COVID testing. Okay. All right. So we are going to bring on now Principal Shane McKay and Suzette Areola, Athletic Director, and for some more information about this mandate. Principal McKay, what do you have to add?
And just looking at the data, we definitely have some correlation with regards to students who are face-to-face versus students who are remote. And we've been working on kind of compiling some data, and just recently just came to light, actually yesterday, that right now, if a student participates in athletics, we started to do some breakdowns on how they're doing academically. And right now, 36% of our student athletes are failing one or more courses. So obviously looking at academic progress, loss of learning being our primary concern for all of our student athletes. And as a former coach, I know that that's our ultimate priority that we want for our students that participate in athletics, is to perform academically to the standards that we would hope that prepare them for life beyond high school. And whenever their athletic career ends, they have their education to fall back on. And so we're looking at this moment, definitely some significant data that students who are here face to face are much more likely to thrive academically because they're able to receive the supports that they need. And those that are choosing to be or for specific reasons on remote are struggling academically. Again, this is not just to East Central High School. This is across the state and across the nation too, that we're seeing these same results. And so speaking from a parent point of view, I have a child in the system. I have a child who goes to school here 5 days a week, face to face, who also comes in close contact with family members who are at high risk. And I can tell you that I feel very safe with her here every single day, as well as I feel safe here every day because of the risk mitigation protocols that we follow inside of our classrooms every day. But I can also tell you that when we were originally on remote only, because that was the directive from Metro Health, and even transitioned into the hybrid where we were 2 or 3 days a week, depending on what schedule you're on, she struggled academically. She was struggling to keep up with her coursework. She was struggling to get the help that she needed. And kids will be kids. And although she would tell us she was doing her work, when I would go back to speak with the teacher, or I'd go back to investigate a little bit more, find out she wasn't. And the moment we could come back to school 5 days a week, I told her, you don't have an option. You're coming back. And the moment she started to come back to school 5 days a week, she began to thrive academically. So I just encourage parents that you have your child that is involved in athletics, because I think the other challenge of being an athlete, specifically a student athlete, is balancing the rigors of athletics with academics, and being a former athlete and also being a former coach for 12 years, even at East Central High School. I understand the struggle with that. And what this allows is for your coaches to become daily advocates for their student athletes when they get to see them and work with them and have conversations with them, and sometimes even walk them to their teachers' classrooms during tutoring times to ensure that they're doing what they're supposed to be doing because they want to help them to be successful. Trusting that, letting them to come back to school, because we all care about your student athletes' academic progress and their learning. So I'll start there. I have many other stories that I'd like to share, but I just think that the data definitely shows that, with especially that number just recently given to me, that 36% of our student athletes right now are failing one or more courses, is concerning, because as Mr. Toscano stated, if they don't have enough, the difference between the middle school level and the high school level is the credit attainment. And if they do not have enough credits when they go into the second year or the third year, they are ineligible the first 6 weeks. So if they're a sub-varsity athlete right now and they have aspirations of being a varsity athlete in the fall when the school year begins, but they are behind on credits, UIL says they will not be eligible to participate. And so part of that is making sure we're getting enough credits. The second byproduct of not having enough credits is your child may not have enough room in their schedule next year to be in the athletic period, because we may have to provide them a recovery period or an academic support period, which means that they would only be able to participate in athletics outside of school. And I know as a former coach, I would want my athletes to be in my athletic period with me every day so I can stay in contact with them on a routine basis. So there's some pretty long-term substantial ripple effects by that. And I know that I've spoken to some parents who, their child is on remote, but they really would prefer for them to come back to face-to-face, but they're having a hard time getting them out of their pajamas and getting them to come to school because they find it to be easier. That now we're giving our parents an option to say, the school's saying you have to go back to school now. So it's time to go ahead and get your school clothes on and let's get back to work. So I'm just encouraging you to trust us. And again, we've had 0 transmissions of the virus on campus, and I encourage you to call me or reach out to me or Ms. Ariola, and we can definitely speak with you about the risk mitigation steps that we take in the classroom. And our classrooms are incredibly safe. I was in a classroom today and I watched the teacher tell the students before they left, grab the disinfectant wipes, everybody wipe down your computers, wipe down your desk, hand sanitize before you leave. He made them all sit there and hand sanitize and they walk out. They were never allowed to have their mask below their nose while in the classroom. Before COVID, that level of prevention for any kind of disease or virus that was out there was unheard of. So I think our classrooms are very, very safe.
Well, Mr. McKay, I want to bring on Mr. Toscano real quick just for a second, because we did get a question, and they're asking him again about the COVID testing. Just to make it perfectly clear across the board, this is mandatory, correct? If they want to come back to face, that they will have to test for COVID weekly.
If they're participating in athletics, if they come back face to face, it's voluntary. If they come back face to face or not, and they are going to continue participating in extracurricular activities, then we're asking them to test. And again, there's a process for opting out. Those things will be considered case by case. But the impetus for that was Dr. Wu's directive saying that if students and staff are at risk in schools, it's going to be during close contact sporting or student activities. And so her recommendation was cease and desist. And we don't agree with that. We think that the data suggests that we're safe, but to be responsible and responsive to that directive, we want to add that tool that we've already got in place so that if students are approved to continue remote, that when they come to athletics and practice, they would have had that test once a week to ensure that they're not coming from the community and increasing the probability of transmitting that virus to any of their teammates or coaches, and vice versa, any of our student athletes that are because they're in close contact, right? I mean, they're running up and down the field, the court, and their mask can't always be on their nose and mouth, and they can't always keep distance. And so we're just trying to be responsive to that order. So yes, it's mandatory with a possible opt-out, but that process will be considered case by case.
And then I want to point out, I know we keep mentioning athletics, but it's extracurriculars, right? It's not just contained to sports. So any extracurriculars, band or any of those other things, they are having to do the same thing.
Yeah, that's our intention. We're starting tonight with our parents and students and coaches of athletics, but we're going to convene the parents and students and directors of all of our other school-related activities. We just felt the groups were too large and that there were some nuances that may lead to some different questions that don't necessarily pertain to athletics. and vice versa. So we wanted to break the groups up so that we can address those very unique needs and questions.
Okay. And when does this start? March 1st? Is that March 1st is the date?
March.
Okay.
Yeah, can I add about the COVID testing? And I think just so all the parents know, it's the first day of every week. So if we don't have school on a Monday, we do it on a Tuesday. It's from 7 a.m. to 9:30. So it provides a wide enough window for our face-to-face students to go in there to go get tested. It literally takes about 15 seconds to do it. It's self-administered. If your child hasn't done it yet, we just got to make sure we get the consent form in. And if they do qualify to continue to stay on remote learning and they've applied for the waiver and it's gone through the process that we'll talk about here in a minute, and they're in athletics, we are still encouraging them that they come on campus to get COVID tested, because as Mr. Toscano stated, essentially, if you're in athletics, you're in close contact. If I'm a batter at the plate and I play baseball, I'm within 6 feet of the catcher and the umpire, who I don't even know what they do on the weekends and what they do away from baseball. And I'm unmasked and they're unmasked. So we just want to make sure that we're safe and that we're adding this additional layer of COVID tested to keep all of our student athletes, to continue to allow them to participate and everybody feels safe, and potentially, if anybody were to test positive, to stop the silent spread and keep their family and any of their other teammates safe.
Okay, let's bring on Suzette Ariola, and our athletic director. And Suzette, what would you like to add here?
Well, good evening, everybody. Thanks for joining us this evening. Who would have known 11 months ago that we'd be here having this conversation? And first, I really do want to thank Mr. Toscano and the school board, because back in June, we weren't sure if we were going to be able to even play. I remember a Facebook Live that we did back in early September, when we were talking about all the protocols and what we were going to need to do in order to be able to play, and then to get all the way through 7-8 months of school, and that we're still continuing to play and our kids are thriving on the field and on the court, is just a great tribute to our school board and Mr. Toscano in trusting us that our risk mitigation protocols are working. We feel very confident in them. As a staff, we worked extremely hard this summer in trying to figure out what was the best way and what did we need to do to get our kids back. And so we are confident about our risk mitigation plans and what we have going on here in athletics. And so as we move forward, we definitely feel that we need to get our kids back in school. We need to make sure academically, I don't want to go back and reiterate everything, but as they did talk about, our kids do need to pass to be able to play. And we do not want to hold our kids back the first 6 weeks of school, because they did not have enough credits in order to be able to participate come August. That's the most important thing right now, is our student athletes' grades. Do we want to play? Absolutely. But because of no pass, no play, we've got to be able to pass our classes in order to play. I think Mr. McKay gave us some eye-opening percentages a while ago, and I won't repeat them, because I know that 36% is going to take a big decrease real quick as soon as we get our kids back into class. And so we're excited to have our athletes back with us full time, and not just during athletic period. And so, I've been answering a lot of questions for the last couple of weeks from parents. All of our coaches had parent meetings so that we could introduce what we were going to be doing, and you wouldn't be shocked in another week or two when this did roll out. And so that we could answer your questions and make sure that the student athlete, as well as yourself, are comfortable with what we're doing. And if you had questions or concerns, that we could try to work those through with you. As they stated earlier, there is a process. We know there are some underlying circumstances in everyone's family. So there is a process, and we are going to take it case by case. So I want everyone to please feel comfortable. There's no reason to get nervous, freak out about it. We are going to work with you. But at the end of the day, the most important thing is that we get our kids back, and that we get them back on track academically. And so I'm here to answer any questions that I can.
All right, Mr. McKay and Suzette, do you want to talk about the process at all of the opt-out and things like that?
Well, I'm gonna speak from the athletic side real quick, if you don't mind, Mr. McKay, because we've already had probably about 20 forms come in, opt-out forms come in. So every program, we have a Sports U app as well as your Google Classroom. And so if you go there, you'll find the most frequent, the FAQs that Mr. Oliver was talking about, one pager with some information that our district nurse has shared with us, as well as the opt-out form. And so once you fill out your opt-out form, you will then return that to your coach. Your coach will review that. They will check your grades. We will check your attendance. And then coach will come in with me. We'll have a conversation about that. And then we will have decisions on whether the form is going to be approved or denied. And again, there are requirements. You got to have the 80% or better. You have to have the 95% when it comes to attendance, and then also the COVID testing. And again, those coaches are making phone calls to those kids and to the parents to make sure that we're all on the same page. Once that waiver has been approved, it comes to this office, and within 24 to 48 hours, the student athlete should get a response back from their coach whether their waiver was accepted or denied. And if it is a denied, then a process of what can happen with that and an explanation as to why.
And I think what I want to be really clear about with the process is there's no blanket answer for all of these situations that come up. Every student athlete will be taken, and every student that's involved in extracurriculars moving forward once we phase in all of the extracurricular programs on a case-by-case basis. And so that's the reason why, if a child and family wishes for them to opt out of coming back to school for face-to-face, that they complete the form and go through the process. So that way the head coach and the parent and student athlete and the athletic director, along with the campus principal, myself, will ultimately make the decision that's in the best interest of our students. And knowing that the primary purpose of why students come to school is for learning, and we know that on the field of play or court, that's where learning also occurs. But for that to continue to occur, we got to continue to remain academically eligible and do the right things, and to prepare them for life beyond athletics and beyond school. We're gonna continue to hold a high academic standard like we have. And so it'll be a team approach with each student athlete, and we'll do what we can to make the best interest. But when it comes down to it, the ultimate goal is we want to help support our families, our parents, and our student athletes to be successful academically, and then in turn athletically, and unfortunately not the other way around. So we just want to make sure that we keep that in mind.
And please know that if for some reason, as they stated, if we need to move your student athlete out of athletics to be able to put them in a class to be able to recover some credits or something, does not mean that they cannot participate in athletics. They do not have to be in the athletic period in order to participate. Okay.
All right, so we got some questions here. I'm going to see if we could do sort of a rapid fire, answer going through some of them. For the athletes that will not be returning to school, and again, that's only if your opt-out form is approved. For those athletes that are not returning to school full-time, will you still require the Monday morning testing?
Yes, we're still requiring that, because if they're still involved in athletics and participating in competition or even off season, we're still asking them to be tested, because again, it's being recommended that we shut all of these programs down, but we want to continue to allow it to happen. So an additional layer to the risk mitigation is the COVID testing. There is an opt-out form for the COVID test. So some people have various reasons why they choose not to, but we haven't really talked about that opt-out process. If they choose to opt out of the weekly COVID testing, we are going to hold them hyper responsible for following the risk mitigation protocols, which means that if I choose for my daughter Suzette to not be COVID tested, but she's found to not be wearing her mask, or she's found to not be following the other risk mitigation protocols, there could be sanctions, i.e. to possibly even suspension from being able to participate, to possible removal, because we have to be able to trust that the student athletes, or all students in general, are following the risk mitigation protocols. So yes, they would still be required to come up unless they qualify for the opt-out form.
Okay. There was a comment, again, I want to stress this, and to Yvonne, I mean, this isn't just seniors, and this isn't just one program or another. This is all extracurricular activities. So, Yvonne, that includes everybody. That's an extracurricular. One did ask, what if it's no longer in sports? He only did football in the fall. That was the beginning of the year. Is my son still required to do this?
I'll answer that one. Yeah. So right now, really, this is the most important part when it comes to football is the off season. And so, yes, the answer is they are required to come back face to face. All athletes, whether you are in season or out of season, and in your off season, you are required to come back face to face unless you have a waiver and go through the process that has been approved. If you choose not to do the waiver and not to come back to athletics or come to, then you will not be allowed back into workouts at that point. And also, that's when we'll have a parent conference and have to sit down and have some conversations.
All right, Veronica asked, can the extracurricular student still be on a hybrid schedule? Is that still possible?
What I can tell Miss Godley, that I can speak from my own daughter's experience. When we went to the hybrid schedule, she still was struggling academically. It wasn't until she came back to school 5 days a week face to face that we started to see that she was improving. Again, everything I think can be taken and weighed and measured. So I would like for, if that's the case, reach out to the head coach and talk with them about a process, and then we can put our heads together and try to figure out what's the best option for your child.
Since staff are able to be vaccinated, will the vaccine be offered to students with parental consent?
I can answer that. I can just say that currently that's not even our call at this point. It's what's being directed by the state of Texas and who is in the order of vaccination route. So I know eventually it will trickle down to students at one point, but right now students and our children are not on the list of approved vaccinations yet.
And then proof, if, any proof that the parents are needing to give, it wouldn't be hard for anyone to be dishonest. I did think of a question earlier, which is, if someone doesn't want to use the community labs testing, can they have their own medical provider do it?
Absolutely. Absolutely. They can go get their test at a clinic or wherever they feel comfortable doing that, and then bring us back that proof. They'll get some type of paperwork that they can bring back, take a picture of it, something, and just show their coach that they have been cleared for the week.
Do we know what type of do we know what type of vaccine that the staff is currently getting? Like, which type is it?
It's a Pfizer vaccine, most recently.
Okay. Steph has a question. What can be done about grades not being inputted in a timely manner on Gradebook? I feel like this has been an ongoing issue, which I understand is difficult with managing both in-person and virtual, but our athletes should not be penalized if work is submitted as it should be.
I could not agree more with you, Ms. Canales. I think my first request is reach out to the teachers to find out what's going on. Second thing, feel free to reach out to administration. We'll definitely dig into what's going on there. I can be transparent with you. Every Monday, our leadership team meets at 6:30 in the morning. And one of the things that we do as a standing agenda item is review grade books and who's been putting in grades in a timely manner. So know that that's something that, as you agree, is definitely a challenge, but there's no excuse. And we want to make sure we partner. So feel free to reach out to me. And I'll be happy to go around and speak with all of your child's teachers to make sure that we're putting grades in a timely manner. One thing we have discovered, though, in looking into investigating some previous situations where we had concerns of that, is what we have found was that the student has not been submitting what they had been saying they had been submitting. If they had been submitting it, they had not been submitting it correctly. And therefore, the teacher didn't have access to it to grade it. So the reason why the grade hadn't been updated was because there was nothing to update, because there was no grade there. And so again, I think it all boils down to communication. And so I ask you just to reach out to the teachers. If we're not having any success, feel free to reach out to me, and we'll make sure we dig into it, and we'll get better.
I'm going to piggyback on that, Mr. McKay, because that was also a concern for some of our coaches. And so what we've done is we created a system that for all of our kids that are on a waiver, and as we're continuing to check grades, now our coaches are checking the grades and attendance every week. So weekly we have grade checks. And so now they also know now we can reach out to Miss Smith when my student athlete Shane is not, he has a 75 this week, and I'm checking weekly, and I see in the past 2 weeks his 75 has not inched, hasn't moved at all. And I know Shane's telling me he turned in some work. So, we can encourage our athletes to go have conversations with their teachers or the coaches to even shoot an email and say, I see that, Shane's still sitting at a 75. Is there anything I can do on our end to help you to get him to get his work turned in, or, just to open up those conversations and make this a partnership?
All right, real quick, I just wanted to show our health website, which you can find all sorts of information, our COVID test results, positive cases. It's ecisd.net/health. And then if you go down to this one, it says employee and student COVID screening schedule. You can actually see the screening schedule, the testing schedule with community labs at the various locations here in East Central ISD. This is another good question. The 80% that is required, is that at the end of the 9-week reading period, or is this weekly?
Oh, I can tell you right now, the goal is we're using the past grading cycle that's coming through, and we're going to be monitoring it. Our coaches are going to be monitoring it on a weekly basis and making sure that they're having conversations. So if they qualify remote and they're starting to fall behind, hopefully they can come up with a plan on what they need to do to get back on track. If they can't get back on track, then it may be time to sit back down at the table with mom and dad, and let's have a conversation around coming back to school for face-to-face instruction, or what do we need to do? Possibly even if we need to step out of the athletic period for a short period of time and get you some additional academic supports during that time until you can get back on track. So it will be monitored on a routine basis to make sure that we're continuing to excel academically.
And I want to add there real quick, we have added additional tutorials into all of our athletic periods. So each athletic period, once or twice a week, has added 30 to 45 minutes of some study hall time. So for all kids, not just kids that may not be struggling, all kids, get them in the lab, and everyone's working on something. We've got coaches that are teaching variety of different classes, so they have the support there from their coaches also. So we are giving them that opportunity during athletic periods and during the async time to be able to catch up on some work during study hall.
I also want to comment on a similar topic, and it's around the 80% or better. Where did that come from? And quite frankly, it's an arbitrary number, right? It's a floor that we're starting from as an indicator to determine if a kid is thriving or needs some additional support. And we also are open to looking case by case at a course schedule, because there are some students that have 5 AP classes, and maintaining that 80 or better at all times is a little more challenging than students who have no AP classes, right? So it's firm, but it's not inflexible, case by case. I just wanted to make sure parents understood that. We don't want this to be something that discourages students from taking on the most challenging academic coursework.
These next two comments, and I think they're going to be the last two that we'll do here, they kind of have words in it that I think we kind of need to recap. For example, Angela Font, she said, I completed the opt-out weekly COVID testing form for my student athletes, submitted it to their coaches. Will I be notified before Monday, March 1st, that they are approved to go back to face-to-face? And when I look at the language of that, we're asking them, they're coming back to face-to-face. The opt-out is to stay in remote learning. So when I look at the language of that, I do see there's some confusion, but that is correct, is that, the way we're looking at it is that all the student athletes and extracurriculars are coming back. You need the opt-out form if you want to stay in remote, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And then we already said, I think it was 24, 48 hours, something
24
like
to 48 hours.
24 to 48 hours. And then let's see the next question. Well, now I lost it because it bounced up. But students that have been passing the entire time and attendance is not an issue, can they opt out? Again, you have to opt out, right? I mean, that's not if let's say that my child has a 90 and goes to school 98% of the time, you still have to opt out, correct?
Mhm.
Okay.
So the expectation is that they return to school unless they're thriving academically and remote, and it's the best thing for their family. Then they can fill out the waiver form, the opt-out form, and then it'll go through the process, and they can continue to stay on remote instruction because they're proving that they're doing really, really well. And we have many students that are thriving. They're excelling, but those are more the exceptions than the norms. And so that's the reason why we're pushing for this direction.
Well, and I'm reading the question, and it seems to me like they were specifically talking about the COVID testing requirement. And, I just want to comment on that and first say that we're open to considering a discussion around why you wouldn't want your child to volunteer for the testing and why we're really asking, almost requiring all student athletes and all those participating in student activities where there will be close contact and difficulty maintaining risk mitigation to test weekly. And at this particular time, I don't know a good reason not to test, although I have had conversations with citizens and parents about concerns around what is being done with that testing information. And so, we would definitely be willing to have those conversations, but the opt-out form, as has already been mentioned, is really a request to opt out of face-to-face, not necessarily a request to opt out of COVID testing. But there is a process for furthering that discussion should you have substantial concerns about the testing.
Yeah, Angela had a follow-up that you can see right there, Mr. Toscano. So it would not be required to do weekly COVID testing so long as that form is submitted approved. So
yes, Kay alluded to it earlier. So there is a process, and let's say that the reasons that are given are acceptable, and you're authorized to return without weekly testing. There is a form, an acknowledgement form, essentially the parent and athlete are going to sign that essentially says that if you're not wearing a mask, if you're not distancing, if you're not following all risk mitigation expectations, because you are not weekly testing, we're going to be less tolerant. So a warning, maybe a second is a suspension and a third a removal because you're not testing weekly. So just know that it comes with a lot more eyes and attention to the discipline that your child is exhibiting with risk mitigation, because we are not certain that your child is not a silent asymptomatic carrier putting the other children at risk. So the whole purpose of this is just to respond to that increased level of risk that San Antonio Metro Health felt there was for any activities where kids were in close contact. So we feel that it's the prudent thing to do in the interest of increased safety for all and keeping our kids on the field of play for everyone participating in close contact oriented activities in our school to test weekly. It's free, it's convenient, it's very accurate. We know what's going on with the data. We feel that it's very safe. My kid tests every week and has for several months now. So again, we're willing to have a conversation with you on a case-by-case basis, but testing is I would say less optional than continuing with remote.
And if there was a question, I saw that because we do have some athletes that fell through that have tested positive and already have had COVID. And yes, there is a 3-month period. And so all of this goes through our district nurse too. So she has that date of when your 3 months or that particular child's 3 months started, and we have that all on file. So definitely, yes, if they have tested positive in the last 3 months, they would not have to test weekly.
Thank you, Suzette. All right, so that's going to bring an end to this particular Facebook and YouTube Live. Is there any final comments from y'all three before we end this?
Just from the athletic office, we just encourage that we bring our kids back. We need them back on campus. The expectation is that everyone is back March 1st, Monday, in class and ready to go, unless they have filled out an opt-out form and have been approved. But We feel very confident in our risk mitigation plans and what we are doing. This is a safe place for our student athletes, and I trust the system. So we ask that you please work with us, and let's get going so our kids can continue to thrive in the classroom, number one, and then two, on the athletic field.
I do see a couple of questions, Mr. Oliver, that had come up about where is the form and how can I locate that. That will be coming from the athletic department and specifically from the head coaches of those programs that will be sharing it with their student athletes and their parents. So reach out to the athletic department if you haven't been able to receive that. We'll work through that. Here's what I can also speak to. I've had a son that's come through our school and has been touched by our coaches. And I now currently have a daughter that goes to school here and is getting touched by our coaches. And what I can say is that with both of them, when they got to the high school, and I know that they're 14, 15 years old, they are so impressionable and influenced so heavily by our coaches that I knew that they were going to help guide my children in the right direction. And for them to be here every day and to have their coaches that are impacting their lives and influencing them in positive ways. I could tell you distinctly from the age of 0 to 14, I would tell my son over and over and over again certain truisms of life. And the moment one of his coaches told him something that I had already been saying for the last 14 years, it was as if it had come from God and he believed it. And so our coaches want to be a part of our kids' lives. And the only way that they can truly have that influence and impact that we, I know as parents who have teenagers, can have is if they're here every day and they're able to see them and advocate for them and love them up and check on them and make sure they can put their arm around them and what can I do to help support you and go have conversations and to advocate for and to build agency and to really help build and mold them as young men and women. And so I think we lose that, unfortunately, when they're not able to have that daily contact with them. So my encouragement for our parents is to really trust our coaches, trust our teachers. They do a fantastic job in the classroom, risk mitigating, making sure our schools are safe. The data says that we've not had one transmission on campus, and I feel safe with my own child here, and I want my child to continue to thrive, and I know that you want the same for your child, and so we do too.
Real quick, y'all, who do they contact if they have questions?
So if you have, feel free to contact the athletic office. Be happy to help you. If you would go to your student athletes, either Sports U app or their Google Classroom, the forms have been there for a couple days. Every program should have the forms there. If not, please give us a call tomorrow morning here in the athletic office or shoot us an email and we will get one to you ASAP. But please feel free to shoot an email my way or give me a call tomorrow. We're going to be here to support and walk you through this, okay? So it's nothing to be nervous about. We're here to help you guys.
Thank you, Suzanne. Thank you, Principal McKay, very much for being on tonight. And then Superintendent Toscano, do you have any final comments before we say goodnight here?
No, thank you to Mr. McKay and Ms. Ariola and all of our coaches and sponsors and directors, and of course, all of our student athletes. It's been a difficult time for everybody, so much uncertainty and so much unknown that we've just been figuring out together as a community along the way. And at the end of the day, our number one objective is to keep everybody safe. And our number two objective is to make sure we're thriving academically. So this is nothing more than another iteration, another evolution based on the information that we have to, again, continue to keep everybody safe and increase that level of safety while at the same time doing a better job taking care of our kids academically. And so working together, I know that in the end, our students and our student athletes are going to benefit. And so feel free, again, please give us feedback. If you have questions, please ask them. Give us a chance to work together with you and your child to make the best decision given their circumstances. This is not an effort to exercise authority or to draw a hard line in the sand, but we've got to do some things to disrupt the patterns we're seeing and take another step in the interest of safety. So that's what this is all about. So as always, thank you for joining. Thank you for your fantastic questions. Thank you for your understanding and your patience. And always thank you for your support.
All right. And folks, you can always go back and watch this video at any time. Just follow the exact same links that you took to get here. And thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you soon.